More college football playoff talk coming. Josh and I are actually going to talk Florida State football for once. But before we get to that, Josh, you've been really trying to tell me one more thing about Florida football, and I'm wearing my shield of protection as I talk the Noles. But what you got for me?
All right, so apparently I'm not great at covering Florida. Neither are my friends that are at Florida. Neither are you, because all season long, and this is on us. Sorry to the audience, we have not done our due diligence. Florida does not have a special teams coach.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Florida doesn't have a special teams
Maybe they
coach.
don't have a special teams coach.
I double checked with somebody to make sure I'm not crazy and this isn't
Wait,
some kind
hold
of
up.
thing.
For those for those only listening, I'm checking also, and oh my God. Yeah, there's I'm going through here and there isn't one listed.
I
Who
mean,
doesn't hire a special teams coach?
so before I wanted to be sure I wasn't crazy, I reached out to somebody, like, all right, is this normal in college football? Somebody that works in college football, is this normal to not have one? I got one word answer back. No.
Of course it's the one word answer, no.
Just wanted to be sure if there was any last bit of doubt I could give them, any last bit of benefit of the doubt I could give Billy Napier. We don't have a special teams coach. That explains there are three. I have seen, obviously, we talk about the undisciplined Florida football team that we've had up to this point. There were three plays this season that had stood out to me.
No, okay, but I know I'm over exaggerating a little bit here, twisting, but like they don't have wait, how did we not know it? How did no one know this? How did no one catch this?
Awkward sports audience, we apologize. We have not
Wow,
done.
we are apparently really bad at our job. Hold up, wow, okay.
So that explains this. That explains the two number zeros on the field in week 1 versus Utah. That explains the jumping over the center penalty on a punt against Kentucky, which inevitably led to the game being broken wide open. That also explains the personnel penalty right before the kick against Arkansas this past week. I mean, how do you have a 53-man recruiting staff, a 53 personnel recruiting staff, and not have a special teams coach?
Well, the money to pay a special teams coach clearly went somewhere besides a paycheck for a special teams coach.
Yeah, off-season checklist number 1 for Billy Napier if he wants to come back. Hire a special teams coach. I mean, Dan Mullen had a bad defensive coordinator, but he had a defensive coordinator. He did. No, we don't have a special teams coach.
What's worse, having a bad coach or no coach? Actually, you know what? No, don't answer that. No coach is worse. That's more concerning. How, who's been doing the special teams?
Oh, nobody. That's what that answers all our questions. That answers almost like for the discipline part, not like the play calling. There's obviously issues there, but that answers almost not 100%, but about 85 to 90% of why this team is so undisciplined on special teams.
There's no, yeah.
It's as if they don't have a leader. Oh, wait a minute.
Find out there's no like wide receivers coach either, no quarterbacks coach. Is Napier just kind of chatting with Austin Armstrong by himself at a Taco Bell every game, discussing the game plan? Like, what's going on here?
And to the Gator fans out there that have actually done their homework and have been aware of this all season, good for you. And if you guys have been trying to say that and preach that all season, good for you, because you guys have been paying clearly more attention than we have.
And also, clearly no one's paying attention, because I have not seen this once anywhere. No one's pointed this out. Nobody.
It's yeah, it's I don't know. I have no other words. I have no other words other than well, maybe that's why it's going the way it's going. Okay.
Well, yeah, of course that will do it.
That might be a problem.
No one's coaching these guys.
Hey,
wow, this just took a whole new level.
Yeah, like they're doing a remake of The Longest Yard. Maybe we can get somebody, that's gonna
get AI Burt Reynolds to be the special teams coach after they use him for this movie.
Yeah, get somebody. Chris Rock, come to Treehouse. Let's just get somebody. Let's get somebody. Let's get somebody.
I know. Back to Dan Mullen. I know he had a loyalty issue when it came to firing guys. Apparently, Napier's has a hiring problem.
but he had guys. He had guys, and it's like at least he had personnel. Like, I mean, 50. I mean, did it ever occur that maybe we could have, I don't know, like 43 recruiting staff as opposed to, like, for the record, we went from like 8 to 50.
Or hear me out. You still have all those same guys, but you also get a coach.
Well, somebody like put it like this, right? It was like when you hire an army, you got to cut back somewhere. Well, maybe trim that army of recruiting back a little bit. We've got the players,
less privates and get a lieutenant.
Yep. So that was something that we apologize that we did not cover on our previous Gators episode. And
but
now,
in our defense, no one has either.
Yeah, and
I have not heard, and no one's mentioned this. I've never heard it on 3 podcasts. I've never heard this. No, really, like no one's pointed this out.
It's like, I mean, you're in
the a Google search.
And now, and we talked about the Norvell thing earlier. I think at least Norvell's got one.
No, suddenly Norvell is. Yeah, Norvell hires his coaches.
It turns out maybe that's why he's turned this thing around, even though it hasn't been immediately. You know, maybe he's got a staff full of coaches. I was going back, obviously, on that last episode. We were like, we talked about Armstrong a little bit. Like, he knows what he can do. Maybe he knows what he can't. He'll go out and outsource that help. I mean, Napier's trying to do it all himself. I mean, no wonder why they're struggling. He's trying to do, outside of recruiting, he's trying to do everything else himself.
Did he have no special teams coach at Louisiana either?
I don't know if he did. I don't know if he didn't, but it could have easily been one of those things where it's like, maybe, that worked for him there. Let's say he didn't have one at Louisiana. Well, maybe that works in the Sun Belt. It ain't going to work here in the SEC.
No, it's not going to work in a major conference at all. But anyway, we can't keep just screaming they don't have a special teams coach forever. Let's get to the main topic. The college football playoff poll is out. It's about the same, but Florida State's still hanging in there in the top 4.
See, I'm so excited about this topic because what I really like about the college football playoff when it comes to talking about playoffs in any sport is that out of all sports that we talk about on this podcast, whether it be professional hockey, basketball, football, baseball, that nature, this is the one playoff that we talk about that's based on opinion. So if people
purely opinion, that is it.
So if they can have an opinion on who the best 4 teams are, because that's what they preach every year, it's who they think the 4 best teams are, not the best records, not head to head, not stats, not just eye test, all these things that come together.
Also, I'm just going to go on a limb and just say Ohio State is not number 1.
And
I know they beat number 7 Penn State. I know, but this is purely a drama pot stirring decision because the AP poll and the coaches poll all looked at that same week and said, yeah, Georgia and Michigan are still 1 and 2. And then ESPN just went out there and just said, no, we're going to put, I'm not saying I'm not putting the 3-letter word in front of Ohio State.
Right.
Florida State at 4 is fine. I'm curious how long it'll take for Washington to get a little more credit. Like, I feel like almost they're horseshoed in unless a team, well, actually, here's what it is. When someone loses the game during Thanksgiving weekend, whether it's Michigan or Ohio State, Washington will slide into the top 4 if they win the Pac-12. It will be the final Pac-12. Wow, they'll be the final Pac-12 champion in theory. Either Washington or Oregon at this point.
It could be. And
that's something.
And we've been talking about it all college football season long, how stacked this conference has been.
I'll go on a Last Dance, bro.
Yeah. And like, obviously the committee hasn't seen that yet, but I'll get to that in a minute because I'll get to my top 6. And Harrison, I want to know what right now, who are in your opinion, your 6 best college football teams? You don't have, you can back however you see fit.
My top 4 plus my last 2 outs.
You're a committee member. Harrison, who do you have as your top 6 teams?
All right. So I'm going to start with let's do it how you do it on TV. I'll pencil in my number 4 first. I'm not going to lie. I actually think Washington should be ahead in number 4.
Respect.
I'll have my 5 and 6 in a moment. My 3, you know, I will still have Ohio State in the top 4, but I'm going to put them at 3. And I'm going to still go Michigan 2, Georgia number 1. I'm sorry, but I know Georgia's had its first quarter problems, but as long as you keep winning, you can't dethrone the number 1 team that's coming off back-to-back national championships. I'm saying this as a graduate of the University of Florida. If that's not objective journalism, nothing is. Oh yeah, and of course, oh yeah, that's right. I got to do my 5 and 6. I'm gonna put FSU at 5. I'm gonna put Texas at 6.
All right. Harrison has spoken on his top 6. I have 6 of my own. I think the only spot I think we agree on is number 1. I will also put Georgia at 1. And now again, I'm looking at it from like my opinion, the teams that I've seen that I think are the best teams. Obviously, we can talk strictly head to head, we can talk stats, numbers, but from what I have seen, a collective body of work as a whole, these are going to be my top 6. And newsflash, I do not have Ohio State in my top 6. The committee put them 1. I have been somebody year in and year out who believes Ohio State for most years has been a viable top 4 team, and some team even in years past that I feel like has been getting the shaft from the playoffs, especially the year they didn't get picked over Notre Dame because they had 2 losses. Obviously, one of them was a bad one to Purdue, but I thought their conference was
Okay, but like I get that one, but they didn't make the playoff.
right. I get it, but I was also lobbying for them, so I want people to be clear that this is not like an anti-Ohio State thing. I just, for this year, don't see them as a top 6 team as of right now. Obviously, they still have to play Michigan. Obviously, they still have some big games down the road. I have Ohio State at 7. My top 6 is Georgia at number 1 because, right, like you said, they're the 2-time defending champion and they haven't lost this year. Have they been as dominant? Have they been as dominant as they've been the last 2 years? Maybe not, but also they're still finding ways to win.
Exactly. It's kind of like it's almost like Bama the first year that Georgia won the national championship a few years back, where it's like, yeah, no, they're not as dominant as they were in 2020, but this team is still winning. Well, and of course, they went on and won the SEC and found themselves still in the national championship because in the end, they're the ones who are still having every final score where they have more points than the opponent, no matter what happens, no matter if Arkansas caused them trouble or if LSU gave them a run for their money. It just comes down to the fact that Georgia should be wire for wire, but okay. Anyway, I had Michigan at number 2 because they keep blowing out every opponent known to man by an insane margin. I don't care who it is, because any other team, one of these schools puts up some kind of decent fight. Who's your 2?
Here's my 2. And again, no disrespect to Michigan. This one is a take that I think people, not just you, but I think a lot of people in college football have been sleeping on. And it's a team that has a loss on their resume already by 3 points. It's Oregon.
I was about to say, I guarantee, I knew Oregon was going to be in there somewhere. You have them over Washington?
Yep, and for all the Washington fans that are to come at me.
But they lost to Washington.
They did. They did. Was Washington maybe the better team on the football field that day? I will concede that. But they won by 3, Washington did, at home.
I don't agree.
If they play again, it's one of those things where these 2 teams were so evenly matched. Again, Washington was at home. At Oregon.
But if you come, I'm sorry, but if you come out on the winning end, you get to be ranked higher, even if it's by 1 spot, like how it is in the actual college football playoff poll, where Washington is 5 and Oregon is 6.
Yes. But hear me out on this, right? All logic will side with you. The head-to-head matchup, I get that. But when we talk about what the college football playoff is about and what we see as a body of work as a whole, I'm not littling it down to one game. Yes, maybe Washington got the edge of Oregon at home on one Saturday. And again, I think Washington's a great team. I really do. From what I've seen from Oregon since and even beforehand, I do like the Ducks, and I would like them in a rematch if they played in the conference championship somehow, some way, or if they somehow played again. I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if they do North and South or if you can actually do that, Washington versus Oregon in the championship game. But from what I've seen, the 63-19 win versus Cal, the big 35-6 win versus Utah, Oregon's got a defense, man. And I can't also overlook, even though Washington did beat Oregon, the next week against a 2-win Arizona State team, barely scraping by with that win, is something I can't unsee, even though they did get the win. From what I've seen from Oregon, yeah, they do have a loss, but I also have seen so many dominant wins from this team. Again, I'm nitpicking here, but in my top 4, I'm going to put Oregon at 2, and I get it. People will disagree.
I get your argument. I do.
Yeah.
I can't have it be where Georgia's number 1 because they keep winning, and then Oregon's ahead of Washington after they lost. Like it's contradictory to me, contradicting to me.
Totally get it too, obviously, because they have the head-to-head, and again, Washington's a great team.
But over Michigan too, number 2.
Oh, my list is gonna get crazier because we're talking about.
You are really a committee member here. Just putting out these takes that get people heated.
I'm telling you, I got a spicy list here.
All right, you know what? Let's hear 3. Let's hear 3.
You're not gonna like 3.
I already know I'm not gonna like it. Let's just hear it.
All right, here we go. This other team at 3 also has a loss on their schedule. I get some of these teams are undefeated.
Okay, I'm not upset with the loss. It's just, why are they ahead of the undefeated teams?
I'll tell you in a second. So my number 3, and again, they're playing.
It's Texas, isn't it?
No. It's the team that lost to Texas. It's Alabama. What I've seen from Jalen Milroe against LSU, against Tennessee, against the last 2 games, they have completely looked like one of the best teams. People are sleeping on Saban this year. I get that because they had the early loss. This isn't like
They just have an early loss. They damn near lost to USF.
They did. And then guess what happened in that game? Milroe got benched, and ever since he got benched, it's almost like reminiscent of the Patriots when Kansas City, when they played the Chiefs and the Patriots benched Tom Brady. Oh, is he done? Oh, is it over? Is Nick Saban's dynastic run over with? This could have been that moment for them this year. I might be getting out ahead of things early, but what I've seen from Alabama recently, I do think they're a top 4 team. I usually am much higher on the Big Ten than I am this year. The Big Ten to me this season hasn't been as impressive to me as it has been to the committee. Now I'm going to segue to number 4 with that being said. Number 4 to me is Florida State. Again, I ripped on the ACC, but what Florida State's been able to do, they have had some slow starts, but they got Keon Coleman, who to me is one of the best receivers in the country, Jordan Travis, who's capable of winning, I feel like, any game you put him in front of. They do start slow in some of these games, but the way they finish these games strong, it kind of reminds me of what Georgia's doing, but they just don't have the track record of years behind them. They're more of a newer blood team.
Okay, the thing about Florida State, when you think about it, who have they beaten?
Right. No, I get that point, but I also
and they should be top 5 because they are an undefeated Power 5 team. That's why I have them at 5.
Right.
But when you in Ohio State, they shouldn't be number 1, but I still have them 3 because they're undefeated with a top 10 win.
Right.
They should be ahead of Florida State. Washington, undefeated with a top 10 win, should be ahead of Florida State. It doesn't matter if you think they're better. Track record says everything.
So, logically speaking, again, you would be correct. Picking the head-to-head, seeing the body of work, if you look at the numbers, the win-loss, but again, comes down to who, if I'm a committee member and what I've seen, what I've watched, how these teams have played on the field, look, Florida State, have they had as tough of a schedule as Ohio State? No, and they probably never do. But this team also kind of reminds me of one of those typical juggernaut ACC teams that doesn't have to play a gauntlet of a schedule, but then because of that fact, they get into the playoff with a perfect record and they're fresher. They're not worn down. The conference didn't beat up on each other per se. Obviously,
that doesn't mean they're better.
based on what I've seen, I think they are from what I've seen performance-wise. Obviously, you can throw certain numbers, the win-loss record, some of the stats out there, but the
And
teams
I'm
that I
not
feel
saying they're not a good team. They're a fantastic team.
right.
But I'm not going to say they're the fourth best team or higher in the country. I still gave them fifth.
Right. And that listen, I totally get it. And I get your side of the argument because again, your top four, it makes the most sense, right? I
And
told you I
by
was
the way,
talking
let me
about
just chime in here because I know everyone's probably thinking I'm punching Florida State, but not Michigan.
right.
Florida State also almost lost to Boston College. They had to go to overtime, who is now a 4-loss Clemson team, whereas Michigan has blown everybody out. That's my justification there. It's clearly been everyone else's too.
No, and I totally get it. And part of this is what I've seen recently from these teams and how they've performed. Obviously, you take in the whole schedule of work, how a team looked in September and August, and I get that. And it's valid to the point of the rankings that you have and how most people have it. But I am telling you, some of these teams right now, because they are flying under the radar, the fact that the committee is sleeping on them, the fact that other people are sleeping on them, because of the numbers that you pointed out for valid reasons, not for unvalid reasons, I think you're going to look up in a couple of weeks and that you're going to see teams like Oregon and Bama in this top four. I am just having them here
Oh
earlier.
yeah, Bama could be in the top 4 if they beat Georgia and win the SEC. Then 100%. They're just not.
Or if teams lose out in front of them, which we just haven't seen
Okay,
yet.
yeah,
Happen. I'm
but
getting out in front of this, and this is why I'm looking at the teams that I think are the best right now. Like, look at
yeah,
Washington's
but the
schedule.
best right now, you're planning ahead to, if teams lose in front of them, sure. But again, we're talking right now.
Right.
I cannot see Bama ahead of every team but 2 right now.
And that's totally fair. I totally get it. But I'm just going to point out something here before I go to my next team, which I'm for the record.
Now
So
we're going on the 5. We're going on the 5 while we still have time on the clock.
right. And Washington's got to play 18th Utah next, 12th Oregon State next, and then Washington State, which is a rivalry game, which is always tricky. So their schedule doesn't get any easier by any means. To the next game, to the next team that I have at 5, that's where I have Michigan. I have Michigan right there. Again, I just haven't seen what I've liked to see from the Big Ten this year. Plus the outside stuff with Michigan going on. I think that's unsettling in the locker room for a bunch of college kids. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to be able to handle that kind of pressure. They still got Ohio State coming up. They got 10th ranked Penn State coming up. This is one of those, again, conferences that I see.
But
And
again,
what
this is
point,
that's a then thing. We're talking now.
I get that. But up to this point, the way I've seen teams play, and I get it, and I've said this already a number of times, head to head, like obviously Washington at home got the edge. It's one game. And I understand that. But from what I've seen since, and not what's upcoming, but again, I also saw Washington the next week play a poor Arizona State team and barely scrape by with a win, where I saw Oregon just completely throttle a California team. So I'm going all the way up to this particular week and using what I've seen the most recent week to kind of feed into my rankings here. So yes, I am kind of taking more of a recent approach, but again, injuries happen all the time in college football beforehand. Obviously, teams in September don't also look like the teams they do now in November. What I've seen from some of these teams that do have a loss, I think they are the 4 best teams, even if all the stats or some of the stats don't suggest that. I have Michigan at 5 right now, and then I have Washington at 6. Again, a great team, tough road ahead, but again, I can't unsee some of those wins that they've had that were close. And again, you can make that case for certain other teams as well. But when it comes to players in the box, when it comes to some of these players down the stretch, like Florida State's athletes, some of them on the outside, I get Washington might have a better overall personnel defensively. But I think if Florida State and Washington were to play a game, I would take Florida State. That's really what I would do. I think Washington has a phenomenal home crowd, and I think that also feeds into how good they are. But I do think we're nitpicking here because, again, Washington just being outside at 5 or 6 or what have you is still like from 6 to 2 to 3. Those numbers are very close. Like when I say my rankings the way I do, I don't think the gap is that large between these teams. I think these teams are very close, which is why I have it the way I do. If it was like a clear cut thing, yeah, then I think we'd all be in agreement. But we aren't in agreement because I think it's that close. And then finally at 7, I have Ohio State. I don't really trust Kyle McCord like I did CJ Stroud. Some of the quarterbacks they've had in the past, JT Barrett, Braxton Miller, some of these guys that have had eye-popping numbers where Ohio State's been able to compete with everybody. Sure, they've been finding ways to win. Sure, they've had a really tough schedule. But again, their schedule doesn't end either. They got to play Michigan. Those two teams are going to have to play each other at least once. One of those teams is going to probably go to the Big Ten championship. The other is not. And that's not a good look for a conference that's competing against what's going to be its own competitors next year in like an Oregon or a Washington, things like that. Those teams have already played. And both of those teams have a shot at the conference championship still in the Pac 12. Michigan, Ohio State, one of those teams isn't going. And that's going to help a team like an Oregon or a Washington. So even though those games haven't happened down the road, I can still use down the road to kind of justify the rankings that I have now because of certain inevitable matchups that will happen.
All right, you're wrong, but I guess we're not going to be able to talk either of us out of this right now.
And I think you're right. Like, I got totally respect your rankings because again, Georgia being at number 1, I agree they're over Ohio State. Obviously, Michigan being undefeated, Washington being undefeated, totally get it. They've had a superb year as well. I think it comes down to just everything that I've seen up to this point. But again, putting Washington over Oregon obviously isn't insane. They won the game. Putting Michigan over Florida State because of the strength of schedule.
Now, actually, if we're looking ahead, we're talking about certain teams are going to do what? Back to Florida State. Again, who are they playing? Miami, who is unranked. Unranked. Why do they say it like unranked? North Alabama. Never even heard of them. And then Florida, who is probably going to finish 5-7. You know, if Washington wins out, they have all those ranked wins. They have like 3 more ranked wins added on top. Right. You know, if either Michigan or Ohio State wins out, they have those ranked wins.
Right, and that's the rest of the regular season, right? Then they go to the conference championships, and obviously Florida State will probably play that. But Florida State's going to have to give the committee a reason, I feel like, to not put them in, and it will have to be by their performance. Right now, they're sitting at 4.
They're going to make it into the playoff. Like, remember, this is my ranking. Do I think they'll make the playoff? Yes, right. I do. Because in the end, like, look at who's ahead. Michigan or Ohio State, one of them will not make the playoff. Right. Texas is not making the playoff. I mean, some people are predicting that they will. I don't think they will. So you have Georgia, winner of the game, because whoever wins the game is going to win the Big Ten. You have the Pac-12 winner, which is going to either be Oregon or Washington. And I think by that point, like, are you going to put in Florida State or Texas? I think it's going to be Florida State because they're undefeated and they're a big brand. And, you know, they'll hang Texas's loss to Oklahoma over their head.
And one thing I also will point out about the current rankings for the record are Ohio State at 1, Georgia at 2, Michigan at 3, Florida State at 4, Washington at 5, and Oregon at 6. I think personally, regardless if I think Oregon's better than Washington or not, I think it's pretty abysmal that there's not a Pac-12 team in the top 4 right now.
I agree.
With how good that conference has been, that is absolutely absurd to me. I get that, like, historically, the Pac-12 hasn't been that, but we've seen what they are this year. We've seen even like some of the unranked teams now are USC with Lincoln Riley and Colorado with Coach Prime. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Even UCLA was ranked just up to this week.
There's a point where 8 teams were ranked.
It's crazy. Like, in the fact that, like, you look at these teams and it's like, I saw like a post on Twitter. It was like, make it make sense college football playoff. And it was like Texas being upset that they were ranked below Oregon because of like certain like big wins or a loss or whatever. And it's like, I mean, hasn't the Pac-12 been disrespected enough by these rankings already? I feel like it might be the best.
Way they're always disrespected. I'm not saying they're always a strong conference.
They are, but sometimes it's for the right reason, right? So it's like, sometimes I wouldn't even consider that disrespected, be like, oh, we know what they are. I think this year, the Pac-12 is being disrespected by how good this conference is. And it's pretty crazy to me that Washington and Oregon are both outside the top 4, regardless if you have one over the other. One of those teams I feel like should be in the top 4. But again, that's what the rankings are right now.
Yep. I mean, that's the situation right now in the college football playoff. Obviously, we'll see if that changes in the next week when the next poll comes out. But that'll do it for this episode of the Awkward Sports Podcast. I'm Harrison. Of course, as always, that is Josh. And we will see you next time.